Hi everyone and welcome to this video. We're going to be talking about 3 vital strategies that you need to have in place in order to give a proper boost to your GMAT verbal preparation. Rather than just telling you what to do, I'm going to start by talking about certain misconceptions that we have about the verbal section, certain common mistakes that we make when we are preparing. And each of these strategies is aimed at solving one of those most common mistakes, one of those most common misconceptions. So I'm hoping that at the end of the video, you're better equipped to properly plan and get started with your GMAT verbal preparation, and that you don't fall into some of these common traps, some of these common wrong mindsets that people have and that negatively impact their verbal preparation. Let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is don't be a collector. Who or what is a collector? These are people who are always collecting different sources, different material, different practice questions, and that's all they do for the first solid 50% of the time that they have for their preparation. So you're never happy, you don't feel like you have enough practice questions, so you're downloading PDF files, you're buying books, you're collecting documents, you're reading people's experiences on how they prepared, and you're just compiling a list of different suggestions. So do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. You're not actually doing or not doing any of this, you're just compiling a list, just compiling practice questions. I've seen people do that for a couple of different reasons. One, you could be worried about the end result. Maybe you're afraid to start your GMAT preparation because it's something that means a lot to you, and you're worried about what if I don't get a good GMAT score? What if I don't get into the school that I want to get into? What if I'm not able to do my MBA this year? What if I'm not able to do it next year as well? What if I'm never able to do an MBA? What if my career is going downhill from here onwards? And we keep thinking about the what ifs. That actually reminds me of a song called What Ifs by Kane Brown. It's a song about romance, where they're talking about what if the relationship fails, sort of a thing. And then there is a line in that song that says, we could worry about them what ifs till the world stops turning. And that's the line I'm reminded of when people are so afraid to even take the first step in their GMAT preparation. There are always going to be what ifs, and we can keep worrying about the what ifs till the world stops turning. We have to start doing stuff. Another reason could be that you're a procrastinator, and I've also seen perfectionists do it. They feel like unless they have 100% of the information, they have 0% of the information. But there are tons and tons of resources that are out there. Tons of YouTube channels that you can subscribe to. That reminds me, have you subscribed to this one? So there are lots of material out there, and if you are just collecting, it's a never-ending process. In other videos, I have mentioned that it would be nice if you can get around to doing about 1500 practice questions, 1000 to 1500 practice questions for the verbal section. That's between 300 and 500 questions for sentence correction, RC and CR each. But that doesn't mean you start your preparation after you have 500 CR questions or 500 SC questions in place. Maybe you're the kind of person who doesn't need 500 questions at all. Maybe after doing 50 questions or 100 questions, you started off at a good point, you already knew the concepts or you have learned your concepts well, and your accuracy is at 85-90%, 100 questions into sentence correction. Another 50 questions, really good solid questions, and you're ready to take the test. You don't have to do 300 questions. So you have to constantly gauge how well you are doing and then see, do I need additional practice? Do I need to rework the questions that I already have? Do I need to go back to the drawing board and start learning the theory again? You have to constantly judge that. Predetermining and pre-collecting information is not going to get you anywhere. So if you're just browsing YouTube for GMAT videos and you have come across this one and you're looking at it thinking, I'm going to think about the GMAT someday. So right now, I am just going to watch people talk about how they prepared for the GMAT. Well, start preparing. There is no better day than today. You have 10 questions on hand, start with that. You have one chapter that you have access to where the concepts are taught well, start with that. Do not wait, do not procrastinate, don't just keep reading about other people's experiences. The second common mistake that people make is that they're not structured in their preparation. And it's this really unfortunate because it's not that people do not have the ability to be structured in their preparation. In my experience, based on the students that I have communicated with, I find that our students are a lot more comfortable structuring their quant preparation than they are structuring their verbal preparation. Because quant seems organically structured for a lot of us. It's broken down into a bunch of chapters. You have concepts and formulae that you have to learn for each of the chapters. So we start with one chapter and we're like, how do I calculate LCM? How do I calculate HCF? What are all the geometric properties that I can learn? And let me learn it one by one. I'll start with lines, I'll start with angles, I'll start with triangles, and so on and so forth. But what people do not realize is that the verbal section is as structured as the quant section is. Specifically when it comes to the GMAT. There is this perception that the GMAT verbal section is all about existing skills. If you have good reading speed to begin with, if you know your grammar well to begin with, then you are going to naturally score well in the verbal section, but that there's not much to learn. And all you have to do is practice questions, unfortunately. Questions could be of varied types. This is such an incorrect perception. The GMAT verbal section is structured. And there are rules and concepts and formulae that you can learn for the verbal section as well. Within the verbal section, probably sentence correction seems the most organically structured for us because of the grammar rules, and you're like, okay, let me learn about nouns, let me learn about verbs and so on. So where is the structuring in RC and CR? The structuring is in the type of questions. There are 10 different types of questions that are tested in CR. About 6-7 different types of questions that are tested in reading comprehension. So when you're learning, do it one question type at a time. And you're not just practicing questions on that one type. I want you to ask yourself, what is this question type testing? That's the first thing. What is this question type testing? What do I look for in the correct answer? That's the second thing. And every question will have a handful of criteria that the correct answer has to meet for it to be the correct answer. GMAT test makers cannot randomly pull incorrect answer options out of a hat. They have to have a way of thinking in order to frame incorrect answer options. Which means if you have a checklist of things that the correct answer has to satisfy, then for every question type, you also have a checklist of things that the incorrect answer satisfies. Reasons that the incorrect answer is incorrect. And that varies from question type to question type. So you want rules? Well, here are the rules. Right? So take an inference question, for example. Take an inference question. What does inference mean? What is the question test you want? So what should I look for in the correct answer? And how does GMAT typically frame inference incorrect answers? That's your methodology, that's your thought process. If I evolve every question type into a process chart, if that's what helps you, if that's how you like to think. When we read a geometry question, how do you know it's a geometry question? You read the question stem and it says something like, in isosceles triangle ABC, blah blah blah, and you're like, oh, it's about triangles, so that means it's a geometry question. Similarly, you're solving a reading comprehension passage and then you have a question that says, the author of the passage implies that, blah blah blah. Implies that tells you, oh, this is an inference question. Then how do you think about the geometry question? You do two things. You seek out information from the context that has been given to you. If there is a diagram, you look at the diagram, you process the information there. If there's information given about, AB is equal to 6 centimeters or something like that, you process all of the information that's given in the questions. Then the second thing that you do is you recollect this mental checklist of triangle related rules that you have. So if the question is about angle bisectors, then you recollect the angle bisector rules. If the question is just simply about the angles, then you think about, how do I find out the angle? What are all the different things that I can look at? And then you apply that in your question. Do the same thought process when it comes to an inference question as well. First step, pick contextual clues. And contextual clues are going to come from the wording of the answer options, and if it's a reading comprehension question, then you go back and look at those two lines in the passage that the question is talking about, and you reread those two sentences. So that's the context clues from the passage and from the answer options that you have. Second, you recollect the rules. Same step as in the geometry question, and you say, oh, so something like this is what I want the correct answer to say for an inference question, and these are all the different things that could be incorrect. If it changes the tone of the author, if it changes the scope of the author, if it's too broad, if it's too narrow, if it is in a different timeline. So any of these changes are unacceptable. So I'm going to eliminate all answer options that make changes. And I'm just spouting stuff out right now, so this might not be entirely appropriate, but you get the idea. You have a checklist, you run through it. You have a checklist for geometry, you run through it. Your verbal preparation is as formulaic as your quant preparation is. It can be as structured as your quant preparation is. One other way we fail to structure our verbal preparation, the same way we structure our quant preparation, is in the analysis of our incorrect questions. When we go back and look at an incorrect question, let's say you got both the geometry question and our inference question incorrect, right? You go back and look at your geometry question, you will have a structure to your analysis. You're not going to say, I'm never good at geometry, I'm going to move on. You're going to say, oh, I forgot this rule, I applied the wrong rule. Oh, that rule was for equilateral triangles, I applied it for isosceles triangles. Oh, I applied all the calculations, I applied all the rules correctly, but I missed out on the calculations. You're going to think about the logic behind why you got the incorrect answer. And then most of us probably have this place where we're jotting down all the formula. So if you forgot a rule, you'll be like, remember this angle bisector theorem, and we'll put it down into our notes. But unfortunately, a lot of us look at that incorrect inference question and then say, I never get the RC, man. I don't understand what the GMAT does in GMAT sentence correction questions or in inference questions. They are so arbitrary, and then we move on with our life. You're not doing that for geometry. Why are you doing it for the verbal section? Right? You had a checklist when you started off the verbal section as well. So in your analysis, use your checklist. If you got the incorrect answer, you should think about which incorrect rule did I miss out on. Oh, the option went out of scope, but I did not notice it. Put that down as you're learning. If you missed the correct question, then which item in your checklist for correct answer options did you miss out on? Put that down into your learning. Have a formula book, a concept book, an error log, if you will, for your verbal section as well. Done another video on how to maintain an error log. I encourage you to check that out. Don't just raise your hands and say, oh God, the GMAT is subjective, which is the third thing that we're going to talk about. This is such a nice name. I really enjoy it. I really like it. We use it typically to talk about, self-confidence and so on. The cat looks at itself in the mirror and sees a lion. It doesn't see a cat, right? I have 2 cats, and I actually know that they act like lions, and I unfortunately named them after lions as well, and I'm regretting that decision as they become older, because they want to be pampered, they want to be treated like the king of the forest all the time. That's a side note. Let's come back to our point here. It's an interesting meme, and it's an interesting way to talk about self-confidence, but at the end of the day, a cat is a cat, a lion is a lion. Right? Just because in images such as these, some people can see a cat and see a cat, and some people can look at a cat and see a lion, doesn't mean that you should do the same logic when it comes to your verbal preparation. Unfortunately, I think that this is a systemic problem. A systemic problem because over the years, people have not used the right language to talk about, the explanatory answers for questions. Not talking about official sources, but usually when people explain it to each other, when students prepare together in forums and places such as that, 2 common incorrect expressions, what I believe to be incorrect, are used very repetitively. One expression is the word second best answer. Going back to this geometry example that I'm using throughout the video, we do not look at a geometry question and say that's the second best answer. We do not say, for example, oh, you forgot to divide by 2 when calculating the, the average, and that's why it's the incorrect answer. So, that's the second best answer. We don't do that. It's an incorrect answer. If you didn't divide by 2, you made a mistake, and we're willing to accept that. But a lot of times in the verbal section, when I see people talking about how they answer the questions and how they approached it, people describe something as the second best answer. And I think it's a way for feeling better about ourselves. At least I didn't fall for one of the obvious incorrect answers. I got till the second best answer and I only made a mistake in the second best. I'm not too bad. I picked the second answer. The computer doesn't care. You're being evaluated by the computer that thinks that there is one decisive correct answer and 4 incorrect answers for 4 valid decisive reasons. So you're going to get 0 marks, 0 credit for that question, even if you pick the second best answer, or even if you picked like the worst possible answer. That's all the same, right? So saying this is the second best answer is a way for us to accept mediocre performance in the verbal section. Please don't do that. Strive to hit that first best answer every time you practice, because there is no such thing as a first best answer. There is only a correct answer. One correct answer. I'm one of those crazy people who goes around saying, I love the GMAT. I really do. I love the GMAT. Because I have taught for other entrance exams that are nowhere near as structured as GMAT and some of other tests are. So there are 2 kinds of tests, the structured ones and the unstructured ones. GMAT is not the unstructured one. It belongs in the structured category simply because it's a global test. It's a test where every single question is tried out in a sample population of real test takers before it's introduced into the database. It's a test where they correct those errors beforehand. And it's a test that tests you on structured thought process. There's only a handful of reasons for incorrect answers in the GMAT verbal section. So they're testing you on whether you pick out those reasons and when you're answering your questions. That logic, that thought process is what the test is all about. So there are decisive reasons for 4 incorrect answers. There is no concept, there is no such thing as second best answer. Do not settle in your accuracy when it comes to your verbal section. You do not settle in the quant section, don't settle for verbal. That's the third thing that I want to tell you. One other reason we have this perception that the GMAT verbal section is subjective is that we use words such as, oh, the GMAT doesn't like if you use this construction, right? Or the GMAT doesn't like that particular logic. The GMAT doesn't like this sentence correction usage or this grammar usage. So specifically, I'll say this a lot in sentence correction, more than in RC and CR. In RC and CR, I see second best answer more than in SC. Spoken English is different from written English. We all know that, we accept that. Colloquialisms play a part in spoken English that written English doesn't have. What is the GMAT test you want? The rules of written English. Standardized rules of written English, in fact. But because the written English rules sound a little weird to us, if I can say that, because we don't use it in common usage, because we don't use it when we speak, we don't stop to learn the rule. We don't stop to say, oh, so this is how I'm supposed to write it in written English. Oh, that's a grammar rule. We don't say that. We say, oh, the GMAT doesn't like it when you say things like that. The problem with using that wording is when you say the GMAT likes or dislikes something, it sounds as if the GMAT is being very subjective, right? Instead, reframe that thought process and say, that's how you use it in written English, even if that's not how we speak. If, say, you're trying to learn Spanish or French or any language that has gender in its objects, are you going to learn that language saying, I speak English, English doesn't have gender for its objects, therefore, this is how I'm going to learn Spanish. I don't like Spanish, you having gender for objects. There's no question of liking, disliking, right? You're going to reframe your thought process and focus not on how English treats objects, but look at, okay, how does Spanish look at objects? What are the rules of Spanish here? And I encourage you to do the same when it comes to sentence correction preparation. Don't say, this is what I'm used to in spoken English, and that's all I'm going to bring to the table when I'm answering questions. Instead, tell yourself, I'm going to learn written English rules, reframe my mind and think about how written English treats these constructions and use them accordingly in the GMAT so that I'm able to get a high accuracy. So let me just sum up all of that for you. Start preparing today. Don't hesitate, don't keep collecting material, don't keep looking at a multitude of sources and posts and experiences that people share. Be very structured in your thought process. If you have a formula book for Quant, have a formula book for Verbal. Don't switch your strategies around. You don't have to. If you apply the same sort of thought process, it's probably going to save you a lot of time because it's going to be easy for you to scale up your preparation, be it Quant or be it Verbal. And don't settle for a mediocre performance because you believe that the GMAT is subjective. Because you believe that the GMAT likes or doesn't like something. There's one clear correct answer and 4 clear incorrect answers. So for every question, ask yourself why the incorrect ones are incorrect and put that into the formula book from the previous point. That's it for today. I'm signing off. Good luck with your GMAT preparation.